He handed me a $20 bill. It was just a pity tip for the gas station girl. My billionaire grandfather didn't recognize me. He froze when he saw my wrist, a hint of an old bracelet with 3 small letters. It was the key that unlocked a multi-million-dollar kill switch clause and tore apart the lie they built to erase me. My name is Piper Davis. The rain at 1 a.m. in Hollow Ridge isn't cleansing. It's a cold, greasy solvent that washes the day's grime into the gutters and smells like wet asphalt and despair. It was the 3rd Tuesday of the month, which meant the tanker delivery was late, and the overnight coffee tasted like burnt plastic. I was working the graveyard shift at the Beacon Gasco, a flickering fluorescent box off the main highway, trying to burn through the last chapter of a trust in estates textbook between customers. The irony was suffocating. I was memoizing the intricate legal fortifications the wealthy used to protect their dynastic fortunes, all while earning minimum wage to pay off the student loans I'd taken out just to learn the language of my own family, the family that had erased me. Hollow Ridge is the kind of suburb that exists only in proximity to extreme wealth. It's the buffer zone, the place where the landscapers and the private school teachers and the disillusioned heirs go to sleep. 10 miles north, past the iron gates and the 100-year-old oaks, was Riverside Court, the Monroe estate, my home. Once the beacon sign was missing the N, so it just flashed back O in stuttering red neon, casting bloody puddles on the slick pavement. I was rubbing my temples, trying to differentiate between Pasterpes and per capita distribution, when the headlights swept across the pumps. It wasn't a car. It was a procession. 3 black SUVs, gleaming like wet obsidian, glided into the station with the silent, predatory grace of a shark pack. They didn't just pull up to the pumps, they secured the location. They parked in a tactical triangle, one at pump 2, one blocking the air compressor, one idling by the exit. These weren't leased Escalades for a prom night. They were armored, customized, and bore the discreet, almost invisible emblem of Winter Meridian Holdings on the tinted privacy glass. My stomach hollowed out. Winter Meridian, the polite, sterile, fictional name for the Monroe family office. I didn't move. I just watched. My heart wasn't pounding, it was sinking, a cold stone dropping through my chest. They never came here. They used the private fueling service at the estate. This was wrong. This was a deviation. A man in a dark suit emerged from the passenger side of the lead vehicle. He scanned the lot, his eyes lingering on the shadows, his hand inside his jacket. He looked at me through the bulletproof glass of the kiosk, tapped his earpiece, and then opened the rear door. He stepped out into the rain. Arthur Monroe, my grandfather. He looked older than I remembered from the photographs at the galas, the ones I only saw on social media now, the ones I was never invited to. His silver hair was thinner, plastered to his skull by the drizzle. He wore a cashmere topcoat that probably cost more than my tuition, but he looked frail, annoyed by the unscheduled stop and the dampness. He didn't look toward the kiosk. He just stood by the pump, an icon of impatient power, while the driver began the transaction. I should have ducked. I should have gone to the back room, pretended to check inventory, but I was frozen. Years of bitterness, of being called unstable, of being the disappointment, coalesced into a cold, hard resolve. I was Piper Davis. I worked at the Beacon Gasco. I was not the one who should be ashamed. The driver, the man with the earpiece, approached the kiosk window. He swiped a black, heavy credit card. Fill the lead vehicle. Premium, he ordered, his voice flat. He didn't look at me either. I was just a function, a button pusher. I processed the payment. The pump handle clicked. The digital numbers began to spin. Arthur Monroe stared up at the flickering back O sign. His expression was one of profound distaste, and then he glanced over. His eyes met mine through the glass. I saw him register me, a young woman, not Asian, somewhere under 50, trapped in a stained blue polo shirt with a corporate logo. I saw the microassessment, tired, insignificant part of the scenery. There was nothing else. No flicker of recognition, no moment of pause, just the blank, dismissive gaze he reserved for the staff. The erasure was complete. They had done it. My mother, Lydia. My uncle, Sebastian. They had scrubbed me from his life so thoroughly that he could look directly at his own granddaughter and see only a stranger. The pain was sharper, more acidic than I could have anticipated. It burned in my throat. The pump clicked off. The tank was full. The driver returned, signed the tablet. I pushed through the slot and turned to leave. Arthur Monroe, however, started walking toward me. My breath caught. Was this it? Was the recognition just delayed? He stopped at the kiosk window, the rain dripping from the brim of his non-existent hat. He was close enough that I could smell the faint, expensive scent of his cologne, a mix of cedar and old money. He reached into his coat pocket. My heart hammered. Was he going to say something? Ask about my mother? Acknowledge the void. He pulled out a crumpled bill. He smoothed it slightly, a 20. He pushed it through the metal transaction slot, the same one used for passing back change and cigarettes. Thanks, dear, he said. His voice was dry and detached, a perfunctory gesture, a pity tip for the gas station girl working the graveyard shift in the rain. I stared at the $20 bill lying in the tray. It was a gesture so meaningless to him, and so profoundly insulting to me that I couldn't breathe. I was the girl who had fixed his vintage grandfather clock when I was 14. I was the girl who knew his favorite brand of scotch. I was the granddaughter he had once taught to sail. And he had just handed me a 20. My hand was shaking, not from the cold, but from a rage so pure it was almost silent. I picked up the damp bill. I had to turn back to the register to ostensibly put it in the till. It was a movement I'd made 1,000 times that night, a simple pivot, but the cheap nylon of the uniform jacket was stiff, and my movements were jagged with fury. As I turned, the cuff of my left sleeve caught and rode up my forearm. It exposed the bracelet. It wasn't much, just a simple, heavy cuff of tarnished silver, worn smooth by decades of wear before it was ever mine. It wasn't flashy, it was personal. In the center, engraved in a deep, stylized script that was almost illegible unless you knew what to look for, were 3 letters, E.A.M. Evelyn Alice Monroe, my grandmother. I heard a sound from outside, a sharp intake of breath. I turned back slowly. Arthur Monroe was standing rigid, his hand still resting on the kiosk window. He hadn't been turning to leave, he had seen it. His face, moments before bored and dismissive, was now a mask of absolute, stunned disbelief. The blood had drained from his face, leaving it the color of wet cement. He wasn't just looking at the bracelet, he was staring at it as if it were a ghost, because it was. That bracelet was Evelyn's. It was her signature piece, the one thing she never took off. And when she died, it had supposedly been buried with her, or so my mother and uncle had claimed. After that, it was meant to be stored in Arthur's private safe, a relic of the woman he'd adored, a diadem meant only for the true heir, the one who would guard her legacy. The security guard, the driver, noticed the change in his boss. He hurried back, placing a hand gently on Arthur's arm. Sir, Mr. Monroe, we should go. The weather is turning. Arthur didn't move. He didn't blink. He raised one hand, his finger trembling, and pointed not at me, but at my wrist. The bracelet, he whispered, his voice cracked, the sound swallowed by the rain. Where did you get it? His eyes lifted from my wrist to my face. And this time, he saw me. He saw the eyes he hadn't seen in 5 years. He saw the features of his late wife mirrored back at him. The recognition didn't dawn, it struck him. A physical blow. I instinctively glanced up past his shoulder to the small black security dome mounted above the register. The tiny red light was on. The camera was recording. It was capturing the whole pathetic cinematic tableau. The billionaire patriarch. The stormy night. The flickering neon, and the moment his carefully constructed reality shattered against the bulletproof glass of a gas station kiosk. I looked back at him. My voice was low, steady, and sharp enough to cut. I didn't cry. I didn't shout. I just delivered the facts. Evelyn gave it to me, I said, my voice clear through the small speaker grill. She gave it to me the day before she died. I let the words hang in the air, letting him absorb the weight of them, the impossibility of them, according to the story he'd been fed. And they told you, I added, my gaze unflinching, that I was a thief. His face crumpled. It wasn't just shock, it was comprehension. It was the sudden, horrifying realization of a betrayal so deep it rewrote his entire world. He understood what that bracelet meant. He understood who I was, and he understood that for 5 years, he had been a fool. Sir, the guard was frantic now. This is a security breach. This is an unsanctioned interaction. We must leave now. He grabbed Arthur's arm, this time with force, pulling him away from the window. Arthur stumbled, his eyes never leaving my face. He looked utterly lost, a man drowning in the middle of a parking lot. He was fumbling as the guard tried to guide him back to the open door of the SUV. He'd been carrying a thin manila folder under his arm when he'd walked over, something he must have been reviewing in the car. In his distraction, his compromised state, his grip slackened, the file slipped from beneath his arm. It landed on the wet asphalt with a soft, pathetic thud. It wasn't just a file, it was embossed with the gold leaf crest of the Winter Meridian Foundation. The guard cursed under his breath, quickly scooping up the folder and shoving it back at Arthur, bundling the old man into the back seat. The door slammed shut with the heavy, definitive thunk of a vault. A moment later, the motorcade was gone. They didn't glide out, they tore out of the station, spraying greasy water onto the pumps, accelerating far too quickly onto the highway. I was left alone in the sudden, echoing silence. The only sounds were the rain and the buzz of the back O sign. The damp $20 bill was still clutched in my right hand. The heavy, impossible silver bracelet was cool against the skin of my left wrist and lying forgotten on the ground. Just outside the kiosk door, where the guard had missed it in his haste, was the file. I looked at the camera. The red light was still on, recording. The game, I realized, had just changed, and I had just been dealt the winning hand. My shift ended at 7 a.m. The rain had stopped, but the sky was the color of a fresh bruise, a sickly yellow-gray. The file Arthur had dropped was tucked inside my jacket, stiff and damp against my ribs. I clocked out, my manager grunting at me without looking up from his phone. I walked to my car, a 15-year-old Civic with a cracked windshield, and sat for a full minute, the smell of stale coffee and gasoline filling the small space. I rested my left wrist on the steering wheel, the silver of the EAM bracelet cold against my skin, a heavy, permanent shackle to a life I was supposed to have forgotten. Seeing Arthur, seeing his shock hadn't brought me a sense of victory. It brought back the acidic taste of the past, the systematic, careful erosion of my entire existence. It all started at Riverside Court. The estate wasn't just a house, it was a kingdom. And in that kingdom, there were 2 princesses. Only one of them mattered. My cousin, Marina Vale, was the golden one. She was my Uncle Sebastian's daughter. Marina was everything a Monroe heir was supposed to be. She spoke 3 languages, played concert-level piano, and had a smile so polished it looked like it had been professionally buffed. She was all soft hands, cashmere sweaters, and effortless grace. She never raised her voice. She never got dirty. I was different. I was my mother, Lydia's daughter, and I was a problem. I was the one who climbed the ancient oaks, who disappeared into the attics, who preferred the company of the estate's groundskeepers to the cotillion classes. While Marina was learning about art auctions, I was learning how the house worked. I was fascinated by the bones of the place, the knob and tube wiring, the way the 19th century support beams were joined, the secret passages the bootleggers had built into the cellars. My mother and my uncle saw this not as curiosity, but as a defect, a contamination. They worked together, Lydia and Sebastian. They were masters of the whisper campaign, the concerned aside, the poison dripped into my grandfather's ear over brandy and cigars. Father, my mother would sigh. Her voice a performance of maternal anxiety. I worry about Piper. She's in the stables again. She's just so physical. She's baling hay. Lydia, my grandfather might grunt. But Arthur, is it seemly Marina is meeting the ambassador's son. Piper is trying to reglaze a window in the old carriage house. She's a tradeswoman. That was their favorite word for me, tradeswoman. They used it like an epithet. It was their way of painting me as common, as unfit, as someone who didn't understand the value of the Monroe name, only the cost of its upkeep. My interest in the family business was treated with even more suspicion. When I turned 20 and started asking questions about the Winter Meridian Foundation, about the structure of the trusts, it wasn't seen as responsible, it was seen as predatory. She's impulsive, Arthur, Sebastian would murmur, swirling his drink. She's asking about the Evelyn Trust. It's calculating. It's not the Monroe way. She's a gold digger, plain and simple. She doesn't have the family's honor at heart. They painted me as a liability, a loose cannon, who couldn't be trusted with the family's image, let alone its fortune. And Arthur, a man who prized control and legacy above all else, began to believe them. He began to look at me with a new suspicion. My questions were deflected. My access was politely restricted. The only person who didn't see me as a project to be fixed was Evelyn. My grandmother was the heart of Riverside Court, the only warmth in its marble halls. She was the one who gave me my first set of woodworking tools. She was the one who found me in the library, poring over legal texts, and didn't scoff. She'd simply said, "It's good to know how to read the maps, Piper, especially when everyone else is trying to send you in the wrong direction." She knew what Lydia and Sebastian were. She knew, but she was bound by the same dynastic chains. Then she got sick. The decline was fast and brutal. Lydia and Sebastian seized control, managing her care. They posted a private nurse outside her door. They managed her visitors, her medication, her schedule. Suddenly, even I, her favorite grandchild, found it difficult to get in to see her. "She's resting," Lydia would say, her smile tight. "We can't have you upsetting her with your energy." I finally got in to see her alone 2 days before she died. The room was dark, the curtains drawn, the air thick with the smell of old roses and the chemical tang of illness. Evelyn was frail, a bird-like figure lost in a sea of silk pillows, but her eyes were still sharp. She gestured for me to come closer, her hand fumbling under the blankets. "Piper," she whispered, her voice a dry rustle. "I'm here, Grandma." I took her hand. It was cold. "They are fools," she breathed. "They think the money is the point. They think the name is the point." Her fingers tightened on mine with surprising strength. She pulled her other hand from under the covers. Clasped in it was the bracelet, the EAM. "This," she said, pressing the cold silver into my palm, "is the point. This is the promise. Your great-grandmother gave it to me, and I give it to you." She curled my fingers around it. "You are the oath keeper, Piper. You have the good hands. You know how to fix what's broken. Don't let them break this. Don't let them break us. I tried to refuse. I told her to keep it. No, she insisted. Put it on now, under your sleeve. Do not show them. Not until you have to. Her eyes were fierce, burning. They will try to stop you, but you are the one who guards the gate. You are the oath keeper. I slid the heavy silver cuff onto my wrist. It felt like a manacle. She died 48 hours later. The funeral was a disgusting piece of theatre. Lydia and Sebastian wept crocodile tears. Marina, dressed in elegant black, looked tragically beautiful. I stood in the back, numb, the bracelet a cold, secret weight on my arm. A week later, we were summoned to the library for the reading, not of the will that was public, but of the private trust amendments. Arthur sat at the head of the table, looking grey and diminished. Mr. Sterling, the family lawyer, a man whose children's tuitions were paid by Lydia and Sebastian's consulting fees, opened a leather binder. He cleared his throat. Regarding the Evelyn Legacy Trust, he began. An amendment was filed 3 days before her passing. He read the legal boilerplate, and then the payload. The discretionary beneficiary status previously held by Piper Davis is hereby revoked and reassigned in full to Marina Vale. Piper Davis is to be fully and completely excluded from the Evelyn Legacy Trust. The room was silent. I looked at Arthur. He wouldn't meet my eyes. What? I said, the word barely a whisper. That's impossible. She would never. I'm afraid she did, Lydia said, dabbing at a perfectly dry eye. She was very clear at the end. She was worried about you, Piper, your impulses. She wanted to know the legacy was safe. I don't believe you, I said, my voice rising. I want to see the proof. Where is the video of the signing? Where is the notary's independent log? I know the protocol. Mr. Sterling looked at me over the top of his glasses. Your grandmother was very frail, Miss Davis. She requested privacy. She was of sound mind. And I personally witnessed the signature. There is no video. There is no independent verification required. It is done. That night, I confronted my mother. I told her I knew what she'd done. I showed her the bracelet. Her face, for 1 second, lost its mask of grief and became a pale, tight mask of pure hatred. She saw the bracelet and she knew. She knew Evelyn had gone around her. The next day, the real assassination began. The rumor started at a charity luncheon. Poor Lydia, the whispers went. She's just lost her mother and now her own daughter. Can you imagine? She stole Evelyn's bracelet right off her dying wrist. The nurse saw her. Absolutely ghoulish. It spread through our world like wildfire. It was the perfect lie. It was vile. It was simple. And it explained everything. It explained why I was disinherited. It cemented my status as the unstable, untrustworthy, gold-digging granddaughter. It was the final nail in my coffin. It closed every door. Friends of the family suddenly didn't return my calls. The internship I'd had lined up at a restoration firm was no longer available. I was a pariah. So I left. I packed one bag, my textbooks, and the clothes on my back. I walked out of Riverside Court and never looked back. My new life was a study in exhaustion. I worked 3 jobs. I was nobody. The graveyard shift at the Beacon Gasco, from 11 p.m. to 7 a.m., was my quiet time. It was humiliating, yes, but it was also 8 hours of uninterrupted study time. Paid for by corporate. From 8 a.m. until noon, I was at Hollow Ridge Timber. I was the tradeswoman they'd always mocked. I stacked lumber, mixed concrete, and learned how to frame a wall. The sawdust in my hair, the splinters in my hands, they felt like armor. They felt real. At night, from 6 p.m. to 10 p.m., just before my gas station shift, I was a data entry assistant at Grey Line Freight, a small independent logistics hub. I sat in a cold warehouse office and processed shipping manifests, tracking numbers, and bills of lading. I learned how supply chains moved, how ledgers were balanced, and how easy it was to hide a transaction inside a seemingly legitimate shipment. I was working 20 hours a day. I slept in 4-hour increments. I lived on burnt coffee and stale sandwiches. And all the while, I was building my case. They thought I'd be begging for forgiveness. They thought I'd come crawling back, broken and desperate, willing to sign anything to be let back into the fold. They underestimated me. They didn't understand. I wasn't my mother. I wasn't my uncle. I wasn't them. I didn't beg for love. I kept the records. I went to the dry cleaner Evelyn had used for 30 years. I still had an old account there. I pulled the records. I found the tag for the silk bed jacket she was wearing the day I last saw her, the one she was wearing when she gave me the bracelet. I went through the boxes of old family albums I'd taken from the attic years ago, the ones Lydia thought were worthless junk. I found photographs of Evelyn at galas, at Christmas parties, on the boat. In every single one, spanning 4 decades, she was wearing the bracelet, proof that it was never taken off, proof that it was hers to give. I saved my pay stubs. I saved my textbooks. I highlighted every statute related to trust and estates law. Fiduciary duty and undue influence. I became an expert in the weapons they had used against me. For 5 years, I had been a ghost. I had been the family's dirty little secret, the thief, the failure. Now, sitting in my car, the sun rising over Hollow Ridge, I opened the file Arthur had dropped. It was a prospectus, a series of grant proposals for the Winter Meridian Foundation. And on the back page, stapled to the folder, was a memo I wasn't supposed to see. A list of proposed donations. At the top of the list was a $50,000 grant to something called the Magnolia Endowment. I'd never heard of it, but I knew one thing. Magnolia was the name of Marina Vale's favorite horse, the one she got the same week I was disinherited. The long, cold night was over. It was time to go to work. I didn't go home. Sleep was a luxury, a resource I couldn't afford. I drove the Civic not to my apartment, but to the Grey Line Freight warehouse. My data entry shift didn't start for another 12 hours, but the night manager owed me for covering his last-minute emergency, and the office was empty at 7:30 in the morning. More importantly, it had a desktop computer with a high-speed internet connection and a scanner. It was a better lab than my kitchen table. The file was damp, the manila cover curling at the edges. I laid it flat on the laminate desk, smoothing it with my palm. The fluorescent light hummed, the only sound in the cavernous building. Winter Meridian Foundation, board meeting agenda. It was exactly what it looked like, a dry, boring schedule of charitable obligations. I turned the page to the addendum, the one stapled to the back, a memo titled Supplemental Community Grants Q2, and there it was. Magnolia Endowment, a proposed donation of $50,000. The name hit me like a physical slap. Magnolia. It wasn't just a flower. It was the name of Marina Vale's prize-winning dressage horse, the one she'd received as a congratulations present the same month I was cast out. My family had never been subtle. They were arrogant. This was a private joke, a $50,000 inside joke at the expense of a tax-exempt foundation. This wasn't charity, this was an allowance. My hands, rough from the lumberyard, moved over the keyboard. My time at Grey Line had taught me one thing: every transaction leaves a trail. Every ghost corporation, every fake shipment, every laundered dollar has a routing number. I searched for the Magnolia Endowment. Nothing. No 501c3 registration, no state filing, no tax ID. It didn't exist. It was a phantom, a cutout designed to receive money and disappear. But the file listed the payment details, the routing and account numbers for the endowment. I ran them. The account wasn't held by an endowment. It was a doing business, as account for a limited liability corporation registered just 6 months prior, Vale Consulting LLC, Marina's company. My golden cousin, the polished, perfect heir, was actively siphoning money from our family's charitable foundation, dressing it up as equine therapy. It was fraud. It was blatant, smug, and utterly brazen. But it was small. $50,000 was nothing to them. It was proof of their character. But it wasn't the weapon I needed. It wouldn't undo the trust amendment. It wouldn't clear my name. I turned the page again, back to the internal approval sheet. It was a digital workflow document, a list of approvals culminating in the final authorization. Grant approved, Arthur Monroe. Beside his initials was the official digital signature block, authenticated and executed by Arthur Monroe. And next to it, the detail that changed everything, the timestamp. March 14th, 3:45 p.m. My breath hitched. I didn't need to look up the date. I would never forget that date. The entire Hollow Ridge social circle knew it. It was the day of Arthur's minor procedure. I grabbed my phone, my fingers flying across the cracked screen, pulling up the archives of the Hollow Ridge Society Journal. The headline, dated March 15th, was plastered across the top, Financier Arthur Monroe recovering after successful cardiac procedure. I dug deeper, past the society fluff, to the official press release from St. Jude's cardiac wing. Mr. Monroe was admitted to St. Jude's at 9 a.m. on March 14th for a scheduled triple bypass surgery. The procedure began at 11 a.m. and was completed successfully by a team led by Dr. Aries Thorne. Mr. Monroe was in recovery by 4 p.m. At 3:45 p.m. on March 14th, my grandfather was not sitting at his desk approving grants. He was unconscious on an operating table. His chest was open. His heart was quite literally in someone else's hands. He hadn't signed it. My mother, Lydia, my uncle, Sebastian. One of them had his digital key. They had his password, his credentials. And while he was fighting for his life, they were at his terminal approving a fraudulent payment to his granddaughter. This wasn't just influence, this was forgery. This was a digital coup. And if they did it for $50,000, they had absolutely done it for the Evelyn Legacy Trust. They hadn't convinced him to disinherit me, they had simply done it for him. They had signed my life away, while he was under anesthesia. My hands were shaking, but not with anger. It was a cold, clear focus. This was the mechanism. This was the proof. But it was just a file. I was just a girl in a warehouse. I couldn't walk into the Winter Meridian boardroom and demand justice. They would shred me. They would delete the logs, claim it was a clerical error, and paint me as a hysterical, vindictive thief. I needed a professional. I needed someone who understood the precise, sterile language of this kind of warfare. Someone who couldn't be bought by Monroe money. I took the last of my tuition savings, the money I'd been hoarding for the fall semester, and transferred $3,000. It was an obscene amount of money, it was everything I had. I used it to book a 1-hour consultation. The name I found was Lena Warwick. Lena's office wasn't in the glittering towers downtown. It was a 3-room suite above a quiet bookstore, smelling of old paper, floor wax, and the faint ozone hum of high-end servers. She was ex-Department of Justice, specializing in trust and foundation compliance. She was the person wealthy families hired when they suspected one of their own was stealing from the vault. She was in her 50s with severe black glasses and hair pulled back so tight it looked painful. She didn't offer coffee. She didn't smile. She just pointed to the hardback chair opposite her desk. "You have 50 minutes left," she said, glancing at a clock. "Your retainer covers this hour. Talk." Her voice was like gravel. I laid it all out, the whispers, the erasure, the tradeswoman mockery, the bracelet, the gas station, Arthur's face. Then I placed the file on her desk. I showed her the Magnolia endowment. I showed her the Vale consulting routing number. And then I showed her the approval timestamp next to the hospital press release. She was silent for a full minute. She didn't look at me. She just read, her finger tracing the digital signature line. Finally, she looked up, and her eyes were different. They weren't bored anymore. They were calculating. "This is excellent," she said. "The grant approval is a clear-cut case of wire fraud. The timestamp, cross-referenced with the surgical records, is prima facie evidence of forgery. So, we file," I said, my voice. "We go to the board. We go to the DA." Lena held up one hand, silencing me. "No, you're thinking like a victim. You need to think like a prosecutor. This," she tapped the file, "is a skirmish. It proves your uncle and mother are clumsy thieves. It does not undo your disinheritance. It does not prove the trust amendment itself was fraudulent, but it shows a pattern." I insisted. "It shows what they are capable of. It shows opportunity," she corrected, her voice sharp. "Sterling, the family lawyer, will argue that Arthur gave Sebastian his password. He'll claim Arthur approved it verbally before being wheeled into the OR. They'll call the timestamp a clerical lag in the system. They will produce a dozen affidavits. Your grandfather will be sequestered by his loving family, and he will sign whatever new document they put in front of him, claiming it was all his idea just to make this scandal disappear. You will be crushed." She leaned forward, the light glinting off her glasses. "We don't have the amendment forgery. We only have the grant forgery. To get the big one, we need the one and only person who can validate our claim. We need Arthur." "They'll never let me near him," I said. The old despair creeping back. "He's locked down after last night. He's probably in a bunker." "We don't need to get to him," Lena said, a flicker of a smile on her thin lips. "We need him to come to us. You said he saw you. You said he recognized the bracelet. You said he froze." "He did," I whispered. "He looked broken. That's his conscience. That's our leverage right now. He is the only person in that house who is doubting the official story. Lydia and Sebastian are already telling him he was tired, that he was stressed, that he hallucinated the girl at the gas station. We need definitive, admissible proof that his reaction was real. We need evidence of his doubt." My mind flashed back. The humming neon, the relentless rain, the black dome camera mounted high on the kiosk wall, its little red light glowing. "The gas station," I said, my voice barely audible. "The security camera." It was pointed right at us. It recorded the whole thing. Lena Warwick's smile was slow and terrible. "Go get it, Ms. Davis. Get the original, time-stamped, unedited file. Get a statement from the manager who pulls it for you. I need a clear and unbroken chain of custody. If you can get me that video, I can get you your grandfather." My shift at the Beacon wasn't for another 10 hours. I drove there, my heart pounding a hole in my chest. Mike, the day manager, was at the register counting cigarettes. He looked up, annoyed. "Piper, you're not on for hours. Don't tell me you can't make it." "I need a favor, Mike." My voice was low. I need the security footage from last night. Pump 4 around 1:30 a.m. He sighed a long, rattling breath, and didn't look up from his count. You know I can't do that, Piper. Corporate policy. We only give that to the cops, and only with a warrant. A man harassed me, I lied, the words coming easily. He was someone I used to know from a long time ago. It was a family matter. I'm not pressing charges. I just need the recording of the interaction, for my own protection. He stopped counting. He looked at me. Really looked at me. He saw the dark circles under my eyes, the tremor in my hands. He knew I worked 3 jobs. He knew I was the only employee who never called in sick. Family stuff, huh? He grunted. The worst kind. Look, Piper, if I pull that tape and corporate finds out, it's my job. I placed Lena's card on the counter. My lawyer, Lena Warwick, will be issuing a preservation request and a formal subpoena for this footage tomorrow morning, citing a pending civil investigation, or I pulled the last of my cash from my wallet, $120. You can help me right now as a friend. I just need a digital copy of the raw file, uncompressed, the original. I pushed the crumpled bills toward him for the trouble and for the drive. Mike looked at the business card. He looked at the cash. He looked at me. He hated corporate more than he feared them. The system only holds footage for 48 hours before it overwrites, he muttered. He swept the money off the counter and into his pocket. Wait here. He disappeared into the cramped back office. It was the longest 10 minutes of my life. I stood there pretending to read the expiration dates on the beef jerky. He returned, pressing a small, unbranded USB drive into my hand. It's an MP4. Got the whole 10-minute interaction timestamped and watermarked by the system. I was never here. You were never here. Thank you, Mike. Don't thank me, he said, turning back to his cigarettes. Just good luck, Piper. You look like you need it. I drove back to Lena's office, breaking at least 3 traffic laws. We didn't speak. I plugged the drive into her high-spec workstation. She clicked the file. It was awful. It was perfect. The low-resolution, grainy footage was more powerful than any crystal-clear, high-definition recording. The garish red neon of the back O sign painted everything in blood. You could see the black SUVs. You could see Arthur, bored and dismissive. You could see him push the $20 bill through the slot. You could see me turn. You could see the sleeve slide down, catching on the cheap nylon, and then the freeze. It was absolute. He didn't just pause, he recoiled. His body went rigid. You could see the color drain from his face, even in the terrible light. You could see his hand shaking as he pointed at my wrist. You could see the guard physically pull him backward, forcing him into the car. It wasn't confusion. It was shock. It was the face of a man who had seen a ghost and realized in that one instant that he was the one being haunted. Lena hit pause. She looked at me. This, she said, her voice quiet with lethal satisfaction, is the kill shot. This is the proof of his state of mind. This is our leverage. So what now? I asked. Now we craft the bait. We send this to Arthur directly. We find a way past Lydia and Sebastian. We send him a package in it. We put the grant approval. We put the hospital records. And then we put this video. She turned back to the screen, to the image of my grandfather's horrified face. The plan is simple. We use the evidence of their crime and the evidence of his conscience to force a voluntary deposition. We use this to make him talk. And the risk? I asked, though I already knew the answer. The risk is total, she said, not looking at me. If we send this and they intercept it, they will move him. They'll declare him incompetent. Get a judge to grant them full power of attorney, and lock him away in a facility in Switzerland so tight, we will never reach him. The wall of silence will be absolute. We get exactly one shot at this, Ms. Davis. I looked at the frozen image on the screen, at my own pale, tired face, at the heavy silver bracelet, at the man who had erased me. We didn't use FedEx. We didn't use a standard courier. Lena Warwick, it turned out, had a background that was more than just compliance. She knew how the ultra-wealthy operated because she had spent a decade prosecuting them. Lydia and Sebastian monitor everything that comes through the main office, she explained, her voice crisp in the sparse, quiet room. The mail is screened, emails are filtered, and the household staff reports every delivery. So, how do we get it to him? I asked. We don't go through the front door. We go through his vanity. She pointed to a line item in her research. Arthur Monroe has a standing weekly appointment with a rare bookbinder in the city, Mr. Abernathy. He's been using him for 30 years. It's a personal errand handled by his oldest, most trusted driver, a man who predates Lydia's influence. It's the one part of his schedule they don't control, because they see it as a senile old man's hobby. The package was prepared. It wasn't a threatening legal envelope, it was a simple, elegant, cloth-bound box, the kind Mr. Abernathy himself might use. Inside, there was no long, emotional letter. There was only a single, heavy sheet of cream-colored cardstock. On it, Lena had typed one sentence. If the signature on the enclosed document is yours, I suggest you compare the timestamp to your surgical schedule. Below the note, we placed a single, high-resolution photograph, not of the bracelet alone, but of my left wrist, resting on the wooden workbench at the timber yard. The silver cuff with its clear EAM engraving was stark against the backdrop of sawdust and my calloused skin. It was a picture that told a story of two worlds, the one he lived in and the one I was forced into. Under the photo, we placed two documents, the scanned grant approval for the Magnolia Endowment with the digital signature, and the 3:45 p.m. timestamp circled in red ink. Beside it, the official press release from St. Jude's cardiac wing detailing the time of his triple bypass surgery. Finally, at the bottom, a single black USB drive. Lena's bonded courier, a silent man in a sharp suit, hand-delivered the package, not to the estate, but to the bookbinder's shop, 10 minutes before Arthur's scheduled arrival, and then we waited. The silence was the worst part. 48 hours passed. It felt like a year. I went to work. I had to. I clocked in at the beacon, the smell of gasoline and burnt coffee filling my lungs. I went to the timber yard, the roar of the table saw a welcome noise that drowned out the screaming in my head. I kept my phone in my pocket, the ringer on high, my hand checking it every 5 minutes. Nothing. I started to believe we had failed. Lena had warned me of the risk. They had intercepted it. The wall of silence was up. Right now, Arthur was probably on a private jet to a clinic in Geneva. His phone confiscated, his children smiling sympathetically as they signed the papers that declared him incompetent. It was Friday afternoon, 72 hours after the package had been delivered. I was at Hollow Ridge Timber finishing a custom order for a set of oak bookshelves. My face was caked in a fine layer of sawdust, my hands raw from sanding. I was exhausted, resigned. It was over. I was running a piece of timber over the jointer, the high-pitched shriek of the blade eating the wood, when I felt a vibration, not my phone, it was a presence. I looked up. A dark green vintage Bentley was parked in the gravel lot, its engine idling so quietly it was almost imperceptible. It was a car I hadn't seen in years. It was his personal car, the one he drove himself when he wanted to escape his security detail. The driver's door opened. Arthur Monroe stepped out. He was alone. No guards, no drivers, no Lydia. He looked haggard. He hadn't shaved in a day or two, and his expensive wool overcoat was rumpled, as if he'd slept in it. He was holding the cloth-bound box in one hand. He just stood there in the middle of a working lumberyard, looking at me. I hit the kill switch on the jointer. The sudden silence was deafening. The only sound was the tick-tick-tick of the Bentley's cooling engine and the distant sound of a truck on the highway. The air smelled of resin, sawdust, and the faint, cold scent of impending rain. He walked toward me, his handcrafted leather shoes crunching on the gravel and sawdust. He didn't stop until he was 5 feet away. Close enough for me to see the spiderwebs of broken capillaries in his eyes. "You're Piper," he said. It wasn't a question. His voice was a dry rasp. "I always was." He held up the box. I watched the video. I just nodded, my heart a cold, heavy stone in my chest. I didn't say anything. I let the silence stretch, forcing him to fill it. "The bracelet," he whispered, his eyes finding my wrist. It was hanging at my side, uncovered. Evelyn's bracelet. He looked back at my face, his own contorted in a mask of pain and confusion. "They told me you stole it after the funeral." "Lydia, Sebastian, they said that you were angry, that you went into her room and took it from her jewelry box. They said the nurse saw you." "They said I was a thief," I stated. My voice was flat, devoid of emotion. It was a simple recitation of fact. "And you believed them," I added. It wasn't an accusation. "She was gone," he said, his voice breaking. The house was empty. They were my children. They were grieving. I didn't know what to believe. "She gave it to me," I said, my voice cutting through his excuses. "I didn't raise it. I didn't need to. 2 days before she died, she put it on my wrist herself. She said, I was the oath keeper. I am keeping her promise." His face crumpled. He knew in that moment. He knew my words were the truth, and their words had been the lie. The video had shown him his own shock, but my presence, my words, the bracelet itself, this was the verdict. He opened the manila file he'd brought with him, the one I had found, the one they didn't know he still had. He pulled out the grant approval sheet. "March 14th, he said, his finger shaking as he pointed to the timestamp. 3:45 in the afternoon. "I was in surgery," he said, the words a hollow admission. "I was unconscious. My God. They signed my name. They signed my name while I was on the table." He looked up at me, the full weight of the betrayal settling on him. "This grant, this Magnolia endowment. It's Marina. It's fraud. Arthur, my own children." He seemed to shrink. The titan of industry, suddenly just a frail old man in a dusty lumberyard. "Why? They have everything. The trusts, the inheritance." "This isn't the first time they did it," I said, my voice hard. "This is just them getting sloppy." His head snapped up, his eyes suddenly sharp, locked on mine. He understood. "The amendment," I said. "The Evelyn Legacy Trust." I confirmed. "The one that cut me out. The one that made Marina the sole beneficiary." "When did you sign that?" "Arthur, were you in the room? Did you see the pen? Or was it just another file Mr. Sterling put on your desk? Another urgent document you had to sign before a procedure?" He didn't answer. He didn't have to. His ashen face was the answer. They hadn't just influenced him, they had forged his signature on the document that had disinherited me, rewriting Evelyn's legacy. And he hadn't even known. "It's over," he whispered, slumping against a stack of plywood. "It's all ruined. If this gets out, the foundation, the press, the scandal, it will destroy the name. It will destroy everything Evelyn and I built. This was it. This was the moment Lena had prepared me for. This was the pivot. No, I said, it doesn't have to. You can fix it. You can honor her promise. He looked at me, confused. How? It's a legal filing. It's done. I'd have to sue my own children, the public. The humiliation. You don't sue anyone, I said, reciting the words Lena had drilled into me. You act. You are not just the grantor of the Evelyn Trust. You are the trust protector. He stared at me blankly. It was an obscure, archaic position, one he'd likely forgotten, one Lydia and Sebastian had certainly overlooked. The Trust Protector Clause, I continued, my voice steady, Article 7, Section 4. Evelyn had it written in, it grants the designated protector extraordinary and unilateral power in the event of suspected forgery, undue influence, or beneficiary misconduct. A flicker of light appeared in his dead eyes. What power? The power to freeze all assets of the trust immediately, and without a court order. The power to remove and replace any trustee or administrator. And I took a breath. The power to nullify any amendment, and revert the trust to its last known valid state. He straightened up. The frail old man was gone, replaced by the shark who had built an empire. He saw the path. I can undo it. I can remove Lydia and Sebastian from the board. I can remove Sterling. I can restore you. But it's not that simple, I said, holding his gaze. An action that final, that absolute cannot be done on a whim. The clause requires you to provide a formal, sworn, notarized affidavit, a statement under penalty of perjury, that you did not authorize the amendment, that your signature was a forgery, and it requires independent corroborating evidence. He looked at the cloth-bound box in his hand. The evidence, I said. The grant file showing a pattern of forgery, your official medical records from the hospital proving your incapacity, the digital logs from the Winter Meridian servers, which Ms. Warwick can subpoena showing whose terminal accessed your account. And I pointed to the USB drive, the gas station video, a time-stamped, uncoached recording of the moment you, the trust protector, first realized the core premise of your family was a lie. He understood the totality of it. This was not a negotiation. It was a loaded gun, and I was handing it to him. He hesitated. He looked at his own hands, the hands that had signed deals worth billions. The family, he whispered, the sound raw. Lydia, Sebastian, they are my children. Marina, she's my granddaughter. This will be an explosion. It will tear the family apart. He looked at me, his eyes pleading, asking for an easier way. A path that didn't involve this level of mutually assured destruction. I didn't flinch. I let the silence hang in the sawdust-filled air. I looked from his desperate face down to my own hands, raw and splintered from a jointer. Then I looked at the heavy silver bracelet on my wrist. It's already broken, I said, my voice as cold and hard as the metal. Better it explodes from the truth than survives on a lie. He held my gaze for a long time. I saw a flicker of the man he used to be, the man Evelyn had married. He saw the granddaughter she had chosen. He gave one sharp, definitive nod. Contact Ms. Warwick, he said, his voice no longer the rasp of a victim, but the command of a patriarch. Tell her to prepare the affidavit. We do this. We do this now. We didn't go to Lena's office. We didn't go to the estate. We went to a place called Studio Veritas. It was an anonymous, soundproofed media production suite in a downtown high-rise. The kind of place CEOs used to record earnings calls and politicians pre-record spontaneous messages. It was sterile, windowless, and had no identity. It was perfect. Arthur had arrived first, just as he'd left the lumberyard alone. He looked like he hadn't slept, but the broken, pleading man from the timberyard was gone. His eyes were cold and clear. The patriarch was back. He had been betrayed, and he was here to excise the cancer. Lena was all business. Mr. Monroe, she said, her voice echoing slightly in the sound-damped room. This is Mr. Chenoweth. He is a certified notary public. We have 2 cameras, one wide, one on your face. You will state your name, the date, and then you will read the affidavit we prepared. You will then swear to its truthfulness. Do you understand? Perfectly, Arthur snapped. Let's get on with it. I stood in the corner by the door, my arms crossed. The heavy EAM bracelet was the only cold thing in the hot, bright room. The red light on the camera went on. My name is Arthur Monroe, he began, his voice the familiar, commanding baritone of 100 board meetings. It is Friday, October 21st. He picked up the first page of the affidavit. He read for 20 minutes. He was surgical. He stated that he had reviewed the grant approval for the Magnolia Endowment dated March 14th, timestamped at 3:45 p.m. He stated that at that exact time, he was under general anesthesia at St. Jude's Cardiac Wing for a triple bypass surgery. He stated he had never seen, heard of, or approved the grant. He named Sebastian Monroe and Lydia Davis as the only 2 individuals with access to his digital signature keys. Then he got to the trust amendment. He stated, his voice ringing with cold fury, that any and all amendments to the Evelyn Legacy Trust, dated after the day of his surgery, were signed under extreme duress and coercive family pressure. He stated that his children, Lydia and Sebastian, had systematically isolated him, controlled his access to information, and maliciously exploited his physical weakness following his surgery to secure their own financial gain against the stated wishes of his late wife. I did not sign these documents of my own free will, he declared, looking straight into the camera lens. They are forgeries of my intent. I am here today of sound mind and body to revoke them. The notary stepped forward. Mr. Monroe, do you swear that the testimony you have given is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? So help you God. I do, Arthur said. The notary signed and affixed his seal. It was done. Lena took the memory card from the camera and put it in a small hardshell case. Mr. Monroe, you must return to your home. You must act as if nothing has happened. You must, for the next 48 hours, be the frail, pliable old man they believe you to be. Can you do that? I've been an actor my whole life, Arthur said, smoothing his rumpled coat. They taught me the part. He left. The moment the door clicked shut, Lena was on her laptop. She didn't dial a phone, she initiated a cascade. She sent the notarized affidavit, the protector's oath, and the immediate unilateral freeze order via encrypted faxes, and bonded courier, to the legal departments of the 3 custodial banks that held the assets for the Evelyn Legacy Trust and the Winter Meridian Foundation. It was a digital guillotine. At 9:01 a.m. On Monday morning, the fallout began. The chief financial officer of Winter Meridian Holdings tried to make payroll. The transfer was rejected. He tried to pay the foundation's quarterly dues, the account was locked. A multimillion-dollar wire to a contractor building a new wing on the art museum bounced. The foundation's entire line of credit was frozen, pending review by the trust protector. The phones at Winter Meridian lit up like a Christmas tree. By 10 a.m., the entire company was in chaos. Lydia and Sebastian, sitting in their plush offices, suddenly found their corporate cards declined. The kingdom was paralyzed. They knew instantly who was responsible, but they didn't know how. By noon, Marina made her move. She was the family's public face, their polished weapon. She didn't issue a press release. She posted an Instagram story. It was a video of her, beautifully lit, looking tearful and brave in a cashmere sweater. "I'm just so heartbroken," she whispered, her voice catching perfectly. "As many of you know, our family has been dealing with a difficult private matter. My troubled cousin Piper, who has been estranged for years, has sadly resurfaced. She is making just horrific fabricated claims, trying to attack our family and our grandfather." She dabbed at a flawless, tearless eye. "It's so painful to see her jealousy manifest this way. We are praying for her. We ask for your support and privacy as we handle this delicate issue and protect our grandfather from these desperate lies." The socialites of Hollow Ridge exploded with sympathy. "So brave, Marina. We are with you. How dare she?" In Lena's office, we watched the post. The volume muted. "Good," Lena said, her face impassive. "She's taken the bait. She's established the public narrative, jealous cousin, delicate grandfather. She's confirmed the family conflict. She's lying to 500,000 people," I said, my stomach churning. "Let her," Lena said, closing the laptop. "She's fighting a public relations war. We are fighting a legal one." She turned to her monitor. "While she's been posting, I've been filing." Lena hadn't just notified the banks. She had filed an emergency petition with the probate court, not to contest the will, but to validate the trust protector's actions. Attached to the petition, now a matter of public record, was a 5-page exhibit, Exhibit A, the surgical report from Dr. Aries Thorne, detailing a 7-hour triple bypass procedure on Arthur Monroe, March 14. Exhibit B, the digital metadata from the Winter Meridian server, subpoenaed by Lena that morning, showing the Magnolia Endowment Grant was approved using Arthur's credentials from an IP address inside Sebastian's private office. Exhibit C, a notarized affidavit from Mike, the gas station manager, authenticating the chain of custody for the security footage. We didn't release the footage itself, not yet. We just released the proof that it existed. The Hollow Ridge Gazette nearly broke its website. They couldn't name the trust, but the outlines of the story were explosive. Scion of prominent Hollow Ridge family mounts legal challenge. Questions of undue influence and forgery plague. Winter Meridian, granddaughter versus grandchildren in battle for tycoon's legacy. The narrative was no longer just Marina's. Lydia and Sebastian were silent. They were trapped. They couldn't deny the forgery without committing perjury. They couldn't admit it without admitting to fraud. They were in a holding pattern, scrambling to find a countermove, to discredit the medical records, to discredit me. The final blow came not from Lena, but from Arthur. On Wednesday, 3 days before the Foundation's annual Genesis Gala, the biggest philanthropic event of the year, the official guest list was updated. An email blast went out to all 300 attendees. It was a simple notification. "We are pleased to announce a last-minute addition to this year's gala. Please join us in welcoming as our guest of honor, Ms. Piper Davis." I stared at the email on my phone, sitting in the break room at Grey Line Freight. My name, guest of honor. It was a declaration of war. Arthur was taking the fight public. He was taking the troubled, jealous, estranged granddaughter and putting her at the head table, directly under the spotlights. He was forcing a confrontation in a room full of the city's most powerful people. "They'll be desperate," Lena's voice was sharp over the phone. "They've lost control of the banks, and now they are losing control of the public narrative. The gala is their last stand. It's the one thing they still control. It's their stage. What do they do?" I asked, my hand tightening on the phone. "They try to discredit you before you can even speak. They'll pack the room with allies. They'll try to paint Arthur as senile, as your puppet. They are telling themselves they just need to survive this one night. If they can just get through the gala, they can rally the board. They can file countersuits. They can fix the books. I could almost hear Lydia's voice whispering to Marina, in one of the grand hallways of Riverside Court, "Just smile, darling. Get through the night. Wear the diamonds. Once the donors are placated, we can paint Piper as a hysterical gold digger and have Arthur declared incompetent. It's just one night." "They are walking into a trap," I said. "Yes, they are," Lena replied. "And we are going to spring it." I looked down at my work computer. I wasn't processing shipping manifests tonight. I was working on a different kind of logistics. I opened a new file, a simple presentation slide. Slide 1, a timeline. Slide 2, the login data from Sebastian's office. Slide 3, the hospital's anesthesia report. Slide 4, the high-resolution, grainy video file from the Beacon Gasco. The Aurora Hall was a cathedral of wealth, a vast ballroom bathed in a suffocating, buttery gold light. 300 of the city's most powerful figures milled on the thick carpet. Men in sharp tuxedos, women in gowns of silk and velvet. It was a sea of polite smiles, air kisses, and the low, predatory hum of networking. They were all there to donate to the Winter Meridian Foundation, to see and be seen. They were not spectators, they were the jury. I walked in and the hum dipped. Every head turned. The whispers followed me like a physical wake. "That's her. The one who, my God, she actually came. She looks nothing at all like I pictured." I wasn't wearing a borrowed gown. I had spent the last of my savings on a single, severe, perfectly tailored suit of dark navy wool. My hair was pulled back in a tight, clinical knot. I wore no jewelry, save for the heavy, tarnished silver cuff on my left wrist. It was visible, stark against the dark wall. A deliberate and open declaration. Lena Warwick was at my side, her presence a shield of cold legal ice. She carried a thin black laptop case. We were shown to our table, not at the head table with the family, but a prominent one directly in the center, impossible to ignore. Across the room, the enemy was assembled. My mother, Lydia, was radiant in emerald green, a diamond choker at her throat. Sebastian, my uncle, was sleek in a custom tuxedo, laughing with a bank president. And Marina, my golden cousin, was a vision in white silk, floating through the crowd, accepting sympathies for her difficult family situation. She saw me. Her smile faltered for a fraction of a second, then returned harder, brighter, and full of pitying contempt. They were in their element. They believed, with the unshakable arrogance of the truly entitled, that this was their room, their crowd, their night. They believed I was a gnat to be swatted. The lights dimmed. A soft spotlight hit the stage. David Thorne, the Foundation's CEO, a man whose neutrality was his greatest asset, walked to the podium. "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the 8th Annual Genesis Gala." A polite, warm applause followed. "It is my distinct honor," David continued, "to introduce the man who makes all this possible, the patriarch of the Monroe family, Mr. Arthur Monroe." Arthur walked onto the stage. The applause was thunderous. He looked exactly as they had planned, frail, silver-haired, a dignified elder statesman, recovering from his procedure. He leaned on the podium, and the room hushed. "Thank you," he said, his voice quiet, almost raspy. "Thank you all for being here. My late wife Evelyn, she loved this foundation. It was her heart. I am so proud that my family, my children, have continued her work with such dedication." "I am not a man for long speeches," Arthur continued. "I will leave that to the Foundation's co-chair, my daughter, Lydia Davis." He stepped back, handing the microphone to Lydia, who glided forward and kissed him on the cheek. She turned to the crowd, her arms open, her diamond choker flashing like a weapon. The massive LED screen behind her, which had been showing a gentle loop of the Foundation's good works, switched to the soft focus Monroe family crest. A string quartet in the corner began to play a soft, stirring adagio. This was her moment, her victory lap. "Thank you, Father," she began, her voice rich with practiced emotion. "Family, legacy, love. These are the pillars of the Winter Meridian Foundation. These are the values my mother, Evelyn, instilled in us every single day." She looked out at the crowd, her gaze sweeping over them, finally landing on my table. Her smile was tight, a mask of false sympathy. "In recent days," she continued, "our family has faced challenges. As some of you know, we have been targeted by malicious, unfounded accusations. We have been forced to defend ourselves against a campaign of jealousy and bitterness." The whispers started again, this time sympathetic. "Poor Lydia. That girl has no shame." But Lydia raised her chin. "We will not be bowed. We are Monroes. We will protect our family. We will protect our legacy. And we will continue my mother's sacred work because that," she paused, building to her crescendo, "is what family does." As the word family echoed through the hall, the screen behind her flickered. The golden Monroe crest vanished. For 1 second, the screen was black. And then a new image appeared. It was grainy, saturated in the hellish red glow of a neon sign. It was the O of the beacon gas. Lydia faltered. Her smile twitched. A small technical glitch, it seems," she stammered, tapping the microphone. She looked frantically to the tech booth at the back of the room, but the video was not from the booth, it was coming from Lena's laptop. It began to play. There was no sound, just the raw, silent, damning footage. The entire ballroom went dead quiet. The 300 most powerful people in the city, their forks frozen halfway to their mouths, stared at the screen. The string quartet, confused, trailed off into a discordant silence. They saw Arthur, dismissive and bored, pull a crumpled bill from his pocket. They saw him push the $20 bill through the slot. They saw the girl in the stained blue polo shirt turn. They saw her sleeve catch. They saw the flash of tarnished silver, the EAM, Evelyn's bracelet. And then they saw Arthur Monroe freeze. It was not a pause, it was a physical convulsion. They saw his face, the one they all knew from boardrooms and magazine covers, drain of all color. They saw his body go rigid. They saw his mouth fall open. They saw his hand shaking as he pointed at the girl's wrist. They saw the guard, panicked, grab him and physically drag him back to the SUV. The video looped. The freeze happened again. A single, collective gasp sucked the air out of the room. The silence that followed was heavier, more profound than any I had ever heard. Lydia's face was a mask of pure, white-hot panic. "Turn it off. Someone turn that off. Security." Sebastian was halfway out of his chair, his face purple. Marina had her hands over her mouth, her tragic tears now very, very real. The whispers began. "Not poor Lydia." They were sharp, shocked. "What is that? My God, is that Arthur? He gave her a 20. That bracelet. That's Evelyn's bracelet. I'd know it anywhere." The spell was shattered. The lie was dead. Into that deafening silence, a new voice emerged, amplified, cold, and clear. "My name is Lena Warwick. I am counsel for Ms. Piper Davis, the guest of honor tonight." Lena was standing. She wasn't at the podium, she was at a second microphone, one we had placed at our table. I stood beside her. I didn't say a word. I just raised my left hand. The EAM bracelet, the real one, caught the golden light of the ballroom. The room exploded. The connection was made. The girl in the video was me. The bracelet was real. "What you have just seen," Lena's voice cut through the pandemonium, is the moment Mr. Arthur Monroe, the trust protector, realized his family's legacy was being actively defrauded by his own children. Lies? Lies? Lydia shrieked, her voice cracking. The mask of civility completely gone. This is slander. It's an assault. Security. Remove this woman. The evidence has already been submitted to the probate court, Lena said, her voice never rising. And now we will present it to the board members and donors present tonight. The giant LED screen changed. The gas station video was gone. In its place was a simple, stark timeline. On March 14th, Lena said, as if she were addressing a jury, a grant was approved by the Winter Meridian Foundation for $50,000. The recipient, a group called the Magnolia Endowment, the signature Arthur Monroe. The screen changed again. A server log. This is the digital metadata from the Winter Meridian server. Subpoenaed this morning. The approval was executed at 3:45 p.m. The screen changed again. A new document. This, Lena said, is the official anesthesia report from St. Jude's Cardiac Wing on March 14th. At 3:45 p.m., Mr. Arthur Monroe was unconscious, undergoing a 7-hour triple bypass surgery. The room was a tomb. The math was simple. The conclusion was inescapable. Sebastian, a man in the front row, a major bank president, shouted, standing up. Your office's IP address is on that log. Did you sign it? Sebastian looked like he'd been shot. He couldn't speak, but before Lydia could, Arthur Monroe stood up. He walked to the main podium, pushing past his daughter. The frail, reedy-voiced old man was gone. I did not. His voice boomed, amplified by the microphone, a sound that had shaken boardrooms for 40 years. He held up a sheath of papers. I was unconscious while I was on that table. My children, Lydia Davis and Sebastian Monroe, used my digital signature to commit forgery. He pointed a shaking finger, not at me, but at them. They have been, he stopped, siphoning money from this foundation. The foundation bearing my wife's name. And they used that same method, forgery and undue influence, to alter my late wife's personal trust, to disinherit her chosen heir. He turned and pointed at me, at the head table. Ms. Piper Davis. No. Marina collapsed into a sob. A piece of perfect, broken theater. He's confused. He's sick. Piper has poisoned him. She's controlling him. It's lies. It's all lies. Is this a lie, Ms. Vale? Lena's voice was surgical. The screen changed. It was no longer a server log. It was a scanned invoice, Vale Consulting LLC, for services rendered, Community Outreach Strategy. Amount, $50,000. Approved by Sebastian Monroe. Marina, Fro. The Magnolia Endowment was a shell corporation, Lena stated. The funds were routed directly to Ms. Vale's personal company. The donors were on their feet. This was not a family dispute, this was their money. Where did our donations go? A woman shrieked, her diamonds flashing. This is fraud. They were stealing from us. Lydia ran at the podium, grabbing for her father's arm. Father, stop this. You are destroying this family. Arthur ripped his arm from her grasp. You destroyed it, he thundered, and I am cleansing it. He raised the document high. Pursuant to Article 7, Section 4 of the Evelyn Legacy Trust, I, as the designated trust protector, hereby activate the Protector Clause. He read from the page, his voice ringing with absolute final authority. I declare any and all amendments to the trust dated after March 13th of this year to be null and void. I order an immediate and total freeze of all foundation and trust assets. And I hereby remove Lydia Davis and Sebastian Monroe from any and all management positions, board seats, and trustee roles within the Evelyn Legacy Trust and the Winter Meridian Foundation. Effective immediately. It was a public execution. Marina was hysterical, pointing at her father and aunt. I didn't know. I didn't. It was them. I just did the consulting work. I didn't know where the money came from. One last item, Lena's voice cut in, cold as a razor. As part of our preliminary discovery, the court granted a subpoena for Ms. Vale's professional communications. The screen changed one last time. It was not a document, it was a text message thread from Marina to Sebastian, dated March 14th. Just get him to sign it. He's so doped up on painkillers he won't even read it. Another one from 2 days later, don't worry about Piper. She's pumping gas at the beacon. No one will ever believe her. The gala was no longer a party, it was a crime scene. It was a public hearing. The silence was absolute, broken only by Marina's shattered, gasping sobs. The dream was over. The lie had collapsed. Security was moving, but not for me. They were moving slowly to block the exits by the stage. The Genesis Gala didn't end, it evaporated. The Aurora Hall, which had been a glittering sea of champagne and mutual admiration, emptied in under 10 minutes. A silent, panicked stampede of tuxedos and silk gowns. The donors, the board members, the city's elite. They fled as if the building were on fire, which, in a way, it was. The only people left in the wreckage of gold-rimmed plates and overturned chairs were me, Lena, and Arthur. My mother, my uncle, and my cousin had been escorted from the premises by the venue's security, not detained, but very clearly cast out. The aftermath was not loud, it was cold, precise, and fluorescent. By 8 a.m. the next morning, the auditors arrived. Lena had chosen them specifically. They were from a firm called Northlight Forensics, a name that sounded more like an Arctic expedition team than a group of accountants. They were exactly that, cold, methodical, and relentless. They didn't care about the family drama, the tears, or the headlines in the Gazette. They only cared about the numbers. They set up in the main conference room of the Winter Meridian building, a glass-walled box that Lydia and Sebastian were now barred from entering. I sat in the corner of that room, my presence authorized by Arthur, who was now the de facto sole commander of the Enterprise. I drank bitter coffee from a styrofoam cup and watched them dissect my family's lies, one ledger line at a time. The Magnolia Endowment was the first to fall. It was, as the lead auditor put it, amateurish. It's a clean pass-through, the bald man named Kenzie, who hadn't smiled once, said. He put 2 printouts side by side on the polished table. On the first of the month, the foundation wires $50,000 to the endowment. On the second, the endowment wires $49,500 to Vale Consulting LLC. The $500 difference is the bank's processing fee. He tapped the second sheet. The invoice from Vale Consulting lists strategic consulting fees. It's a textbook wash. They didn't even try to hide the numbers. They just gave it a different name. But that, as Lena had predicted, was just the skirmish. The real war was the Evelyn Legacy Trust. The auditors, armed with Arthur's full authority, had requisitioned the original wet ink amendments from Mr. Sterling's locked files. The disgraced lawyer had complied without a fight. His only goal now was to avoid disbarment. The 3 amendments were laid out under a high-intensity lamp. The first one, dated the day after Arthur's surgery, was the one that disinherited me. The next 2, dated a week later, were more technical, granting Sebastian sweeping discretionary powers and installing Marina as the future successor to the trust protector role, effectively locking me out forever. Look at the signature, Arthur said, his voice quiet. He was sitting at the head of the table, looking older than he had at the lumberyard. Kenzie put on a pair of magnifying glasses. "It's a good signature, Mr. Monroe. Very consistent." "Too consistent," Lena said, sliding a new document across the table. It was one of Arthur's signed bank letters from the month before his surgery. "Compare it." We all leaned in. The before signature was strong, arrogant, with a slight upward flourish at the end of the Monroe. The 3 amendment signatures were nearly identical, perfect copies. "Now look at this," I said. I slid my own small piece of evidence forward. It was the manila file Arthur had dropped at my feet at the gas station. His initials, AM, were scrolled on the cover. He had initialed it that night in the car, after he'd recovered from his surgery. Those 2 letters were visibly different. They were shaky. The A was strong, but the M wavered. "A clear, unmistakable post-operative tremor in his hand," I said, pointing to the gas station folder. The man who initialed this file could not have produced the perfect, steady signatures on these amendments, all dated just days after a triple bypass. Kenzie nodded slowly. "They didn't just forge his name," he said. "They forged his healthy name. They used a template, a scan. They practiced the defense that Lydia and Sebastian's lawyers were already trying to float, that Arthur was just forgetful. That he had signed them, perhaps from a tablet in his hospital bed, while he lay on that table. The hospital records, subpoenaed by Lena, were the final nail. The anesthesiologist's report was clinical and brutal, patient under general anesthesia, fully intubated, unresponsive. You couldn't sign a grocery list, let alone a multi-million-dollar trust amendment, while you were clinically unconscious. The auditors went deeper. They weren't just looking at the bank records. They were now, with Arthur's blessing and a fresh court order, mirror imaging the hard drives of the entire Winter Meridian executive floor. On the 3rd day, they found it. It was in a deleted temp folder on the personal drive of Sebastian's executive assistant. She had, it seemed, been ordered to clean her drive, but Northlight's technicians were better than she was. The file was titled Practice Scans PDF. It was a dozen pages long, page after page of Arthur's signature, scanned, traced, and practiced. Some were shaky, some were too bold. And on the last page, there were 3 signatures side by side that were a perfect 1-to-1 match for the 3 amendments. It was the smoking gun. It was the literal blueprint for the crime. They had help, Kenzie announced on the 4th day. The conspiracy, it turned out, was wider. The Vail Consulting invoice. It was approved not just by Sebastian, but it required a co-signer from the Foundation's Finance Committee. He pulled up another file, a vendor profile for Vail Consulting LLC. The co-signer was a board member, a man named Julian Hayes. Arthur swore, a short, violent word. "Julian has been on my board for 20 years. Julian," Lena added, pulling up her own laptop, "is also the co-owner of a separate LLC registered in Delaware. JM Property Ventures. J for Julian. M for Marina," I finished. The bitter taste of it all rising in my throat. Marina hadn't just been taking money, she had compromised a board member. She had an ally on the inside, who was rubber-stamping her fraud in exchange for a piece of her other businesses. The whole thing was rotten from the root to the highest branch. Lena stood up. "That's it," she said. "We have the forgery. We have the practice sheets. We have the co-conspirator. We have the entire criminal enterprise. It's time to end this." She left the room. I heard her voice in the hallway, crisp and cold, speaking to her office. "File the injunction. I want a full temporary restraining order on the entire Winter Meridian email repository. All of it. I want every email sent by Lydia Davis, Sebastian Monroe, Marina Vail, and Julian Hayes for the last 5 years. I want them seized and mirrored today. I stayed with Arthur in the glass box. He looked small in his large leather chair. He had won. He had exposed them, but he looked defeated. She knew, he whispered, staring at the practice signatures. My God, Piper. Evelyn knew. She knew they were weak. I said, she didn't know they were this venal. No, she knew, he insisted, his voice cracking. He looked up at me. Come with me. There's something you need to see. We left the auditors to their numbers and drove back to Riverside Court. It was the first time I had been inside the gates in 5 years. The house was silent. The staff, loyal to Lydia and Sebastian, had been dismissed. It was a mausoleum. He led me to his private study, the one I had never been allowed to enter as a child. It smelled of old leather, pipe tobacco, and floor wax. Behind a large oil painting of a stormy sea, he manipulated a piece of wooden molding. A section of the bookshelf clicked open, revealing a small black cast-iron safe. He spun the dial, his hand steady. The door swung open. It was full of her things, not just jewelry, but letters. A pair of small, worn driving gloves, a photograph of him as a young man. I looked through this after the gala, he said. I was looking for my own peace of mind, for her. And I found this. It was taped to the bottom of her jewelry box. I've read it 100 times since. He handed me a single sheet of pale blue stationery folded in half. It was Evelyn's handwriting. It wasn't a legal document, it was a letter addressed to him, never sent. My dearest Arthur, it read. If you are reading this, I am gone. Be kind to yourself. But more importantly, be wise. Our children are not what we had hoped. They see the name as a prize. They see the money as a weapon. They do not have the good hands. Arthur, they do not know how to fix what is broken. They only know how to take. I had to stop, my vision blurring. I looked up. Arthur was staring out the window, his back to me. I read on. There is only one Piper. She has the good hands. She has your mind. But my heart, she is the one who guards the gate. They will try to stop her. They will tell you she is common, that she is impulsive. It is a lie. She is the only one I trust to keep us safe. And then the final line, the one who holds the bracelet, my Arthur, must be the one who holds the fund. It is my dying wish. Do not let them talk you out of it. I closed the letter. The heavy silver on my wrist felt like it was burning my skin. She wrote this, I whispered. And you. He turned, and his face was wet with tears. It was the first time I had ever seen him cry. I let them, he admitted, his voice a raw whisper. I let them. After she died, Lydia and Sebastian, they were relentless. They said I was grieving, that I was emotional. They said a handwritten note wasn't a legal document. They brought in Sterling, who said it would be irresponsible to hand that kind of power to someone so untested. They told me it was the right thing to do, the strong thing to do, to protect the legacy. And I was weak. I was old. And I chose my children over my wife's soul. He took a deep, shuddering breath. She knew. She gave you that bracelet knowing this day would come. She knew I would fail, and she put her faith in you. The phone in my pocket buzzed loud in the silence of the room. It was Lena. It's done, she said. The Northlight report is final. Every partner, every board member, every donor has a copy. The forgery, the conspiracy, the vendor fraud, it's all there in black and white. I looked at Arthur, at the letter in my hand, at the bracelet on my wrist. What now? I asked. Now, Lena's voice was crisp. The Foundation's Board of Directors has just called an emergency session for tomorrow morning. There's only one item on the agenda, a full vote of no confidence, and a second vote to appoint a new interim protector. The Frostbridge conference room was on the 40th floor, a sterile glass box suspended in the clouds. It was designed to make mortals feel like gods and gods feel immortal. The table was a single 40-foot slab of polished black granite, so reflective it looked wet, so cold it leached the heat from your hands. We were all there. Arthur sat at the head of the table. I sat on his right, with Lena Warwick beside me. On the far side, looking small and diminished against the vast cityscape, were Lydia and Sebastian. They were flanked by a new set of lawyers, sharp-suited men from a firm that specialized in managing the fallout of corporate titans. The independent board members filled the other chairs. They were not smiling. In front of each one was a thick, spiral-bound copy of the Northlight Forensics Report. Before the chairman, Eleanor Vance, could even call the meeting to order, Lydia's new lead attorney spoke. His voice was a smooth, expensive purr. Madam Chair, before this kangaroo court proceeds, my client, Ms. Lydia Davis, wishes to make a statement concerning the profound and malicious conflicts of interest motivating this action. Eleanor nodded, her face impassive. Ms. Davis. Lydia, my mother, sat up. She was wearing a severe grey suit, her hair pulled back. She was aiming for wronged executive. Her voice was strained, the velvet worn thin, revealing the steel underneath. This is not a board meeting, she began, her eyes scanning the faces of the directors. It is an ambush, a coordinated, vindictive attack orchestrated by a girl who has been a pathological liar since childhood. Her gaze, hot and filled with a lifetime of resentment, landed on me. Piper Davis is not a victim. She is a predator. She was disinherited by her grandmother for theft, a fact she conveniently omits. She is a gold digger, plain and simple. She has seen an opportunity, a moment of weakness in her elderly grandfather. She gestured to Arthur, who remained motionless. And she has pounced. Every document she has provided is suspect. Every claim is a fabrication. All designed for one purpose, to seize assets she was never meant to have. The room was utterly silent. The accusation hung in the air. The board members looked at me. They had read the numbers, but Lydia had just planted the seed of doubt. Was I doing this for justice, or was it just a hostile takeover? I didn't answer. I didn't look at Lena. I didn't look at the board. I looked directly at my mother. Slowly, I reached for my left wrist. I unfastened the clasp of the heavy, tarnished silver bracelet, the EAM. I placed it on the black granite table. The silence, which had been heavy, now became absolute. With one finger, I slid the bracelet across the polished expanse. It made a low, wispy, metallic sound, the only sound in the 40th floor silence. It slid over the reflection of the clouds. A small, ancient piece of silver cutting a path across the black void. It stopped perfectly in the dead center of the table. It was an answer. It was a refutation. It was the entire case. It was Evelyn sitting at the table with us. Lydia's face went pale. Her lawyer shuffled his papers. An accusation of greed cannot survive the presentation of a sacred object. Arthur cleared his throat. He looked at the bracelet. His eyes filled with a pain that was almost unbearable. He had the floor. My daughter Lydia is right, he said, his voice quiet but carrying in the stark room. This is about my wife's legacy, and it is about her last wishes. Lydia's lawyer leaned forward, sensing an opening. Which are represented in the trust amendments, Mr. Monroe, the very ones you signed. No, Arthur said, they are represented in this. He pulled the folded pale blue stationery from his breast pocket. Evelyn's letter. Lena held up a hand. For the record, Madam Chair, we are not presenting this as a holographic will or a legal codicil. It does not, by itself, have the power to allocate assets. We are presenting it, Arthur said, his voice rising, gaining its old power, as the definitive statement of intent written by the Trust's founder to guide the man she named as Trust Protector. An intent that I ignored, an intent that my children, he looked at them, actively and criminally conspired to defy. He put on his reading glasses. He read the letter aloud. He read the part about good hands and the name as a prize. He read the part about them only knowing how to take. He read her calling me the gatekeeper. And then he read the final line, his voice thick with emotion, the one who holds the bracelet, my Arthur, must be the one who holds the fund. It is my dying wish. Do not let them talk you out of it. He folded the letter. I let them talk me out of it, he said, his voice raw. I failed her. I failed this board. I am activating the Protector Clause today. Not just because a crime was committed, but because my sacred duty as protector was compromised from within my own house. Eleanor Vance, the chair, looked at the bracelet, then at the letter, then at the audit report. The Protector Clause is clear, she said, her voice sharp. It grants the protector the unilateral right to freeze assets and revert amendments, which he has done. However, the permanent removal of trustees and the dissolution of contracts requires a full board vote, and you have the evidence for it, Lena said, her voice clipping. We have established a clear, multi-point chain of facts. 1. The criminal forgery of the $50,000 grant, proven by the server logs. 2. The fraudulent trust amendments, proven by the medical records and the signature practice sheets found on Sebastian's own executive server. 3. The motive, proven by this letter showing a clear conspiracy to subvert Evelyn Monroe's stated wishes. Lydia's lawyer stood up. This is a farce. A handwritten note, a convenient medical report. It's circumstantial. You have no proof of a true conspiracy. Is that so? Eleanor said, her eyes like ice. She turned to the auditor from Northlight Forensics, who was sitting at the end of the table. Mr. Kenzie, your final report, the matter of the co-signatory. This was the kill shot. Kenzie adjusted his glasses. Yes, Madam Chair. As part of our audit into the Magnolia endowment payments, we analyzed all approvals. The payments to Vail Consulting required a co-signature from a member of the Foundation's Finance Committee. That signature belonged to Mr. Julian Hayes, the board member named Julian, who had been sitting perfectly still and silent, looked as if he had been electrocuted. Our investigation, Kenzie continued in his monotone, found that Mr. Hayes is a non-disclosed partner in a separate Delaware LLC, JM Property Ventures, registered 2 years ago. The M in that partnership is Ms. Marina Vail. A collective gasp went through the room. It was no longer a family squabble, it was a criminal enterprise. Julian, Eleanor Vance whispered, her voice full of disbelief, you signed off on the invoices. You were her partner. Julian Hayes said nothing. He simply stood up, his face the color of wax, and walked out of the room, his career and reputation dissolving behind him. We are calling the votes, Eleanor Vance said, her voice like a hammer. Motion 1, to accept the Northlight Forensics report as an undisputed record of fact. Favor. Every hand went up. Motion 2, to ratify the Trust Protector's activation of Article 7, Section 4, thereby nullifying all trust amendments dated after March 13, and reverting the Evelyn Legacy Trust to its prior state. Unanimous. Motion 3, the immediate and permanent removal for cause of Lydia Davis and Sebastian Monroe from all board positions, trustee roles, and committee memberships within the Winter Meridian Foundation and the Evelyn Legacy Trust. Effective immediately. The vote was a formality, a sea of hands. Lydia made a small, strangled sound. Motion 4, Eleanor continued, to permanently sever all contracts with Vail Consulting LLC, and to institute a 10-year ban prohibiting any professional association or contract with Ms. Marina Vail, or any entity she controls. Passed. It is done, Eleanor Vance said. Her expression was one of profound disappointment, as she looked at Lydia and Sebastian. You will be escorted from the building. Your access is revoked. I let out a breath I'd been holding for 5 years. It was over. We had won. Arthur leaned back. His shoulders slumped. A terrible weight finally lifted. Thank you, Eleanor, he whispered. We are not finished, Arthur, she said. He frowned. What's left? The protectorship, she said simply. The air in the room tensed again. The bylaws are precise, Eleanor said, tapping the thick binder in front of her. In the event the protector clause is activated due to gross negligence, or a failure of the protector's own oversight, which by your own admission has occurred, the board is required to review and reconfirm the protector's position. Arthur stared at her. What are you saying? I am saying, Eleanor said, that you failed in your duty. Arthur, you were asleep at the wheel. You allowed the wolves into the hen house. The board and the donors need assurance that this will never, ever happen again. She let the words hang in the air. The agenda is not complete, she said. We have one final item of business to discuss and vote on, who is fit to hold the title of Trust Protector moving forward. She looked at Arthur, the old lion, now wounded and exposed. Then she turned her eyes, and the eyes of the entire board, to me. The silence in the Frostbridge conference room was brittle, a thin sheet of ice over a deep, dark ocean. The board members looked at me, then at Eleanor, then at Arthur. Lydia and Sebastian were still frozen in their chairs, legally executed, but physically present. The ghosts at the feast. Arthur, the wounded lion, was not done. He had taken their bullets, and now he was taking back control. Eleanor is right, he said, his voice quiet, but regaining its iron. I failed. I was blinded by what I wanted my family to be, not what they were. I am therefore unfit to continue as the sole protector. The risk is too high, he turned, not to the board, but to me. But Evelyn's wish will be honored. I propose the board vote to appoint Piper Davis as the successor trust protector, effective immediately. A bomb had gone off. Lydia actually laughed, a short, hysterical bark. She's 34 years old. She pumps gasoline. A board member, a man I didn't know, held up a hand. Arthur, we respect what you've done today, what she has done. But the optics are untenable. The very conflict of interest, blood relatives, is what caused this catastrophe. We just removed 2 Monroes. We cannot, in good conscience, install a third one in the same seat of absolute power. It's too much risk. The room murmured in agreement. They were right. They had escaped one dynasty. They weren't about to lock themselves into another. Before I could even process the rejection, Lena Warwick spoke. Her voice was flat, clinical, and cut through the emotion like a scalpel. We anticipated this objection, she said, opening a new file. And we propose a solution, a lock and key provision. Ms. Davis will not be an absolute protector. She will be a constitutional one. She projected the text onto the main screen. The proposal is this. The board will appoint a new independent commissioner, selected from a neutral third party, perhaps a retired federal judge. This commissioner will co-sign every discretionary action taken by the protector. She looked at the skeptical faces. You are not crowning a new monarch. You are hiring your most dedicated, most invested security guard. You are giving the keys to the only person who has proven she will protect the house, not plunder it, and you are putting an ankle monitor on her while she does it. The mood in the room shifted. It was no longer a question of blood, it was a question of governance. It was brilliant. Eleanor Vance nodded slowly. That is a viable path forward. We will table this vote for 48 hours to review the proposal. The gavel struck. The meeting was adjourned. Lydia and Sebastian were ushered out by security. Silent and grey-faced. They didn't look at me. We walked out of that elevator into a war. The media had the story. Gas station granddaughter topples Monroe dynasty. The inside story of the Genesis Gala massacre. Who is Piper Davis? They were everywhere. They were parked outside the Beacon Gasco, filming the pumps. They were at the timber yard, trying to interview my boss. They were camped outside my tiny apartment. I was overnight the most famous and infamous woman in the state. I was the vindictive thief. I was the avenging angel. I said nothing. While the press feasted, Lena issued a single, dry statement. The actions taken by the Trust Protector were to restore the fiduciary integrity of the Winter Meridian Foundation and the Evelyn Legacy Trust. A full transparency report and audit will be made available to the public. We will have no further comment. I went back to the timber yard. I needed to sand something. I needed to feel the grit in the wood and the reality. The counterassault began exactly 72 hours later. It was, of course, a lawsuit. Lydia filed. Her lawyers were fast and expensive. The claims were spectacular. She alleged I had maliciously entrapped her father, a vulnerable, senile old man, by staging the encounter at the gas station. She claimed I had used coercive control and undue influence to poison his mind and induce him to sign documents he did not understand. She was suing to have Arthur declared mentally incompetent, to have all his actions at the gala and in the boardroom nullified, and to have a temporary conservator appointed, her nominee for conservator herself. She's insane, I said, reading the filing in Lena's office. She's suing him for being senile, after we proved she forged his signature while he was incapacitated. It's not insane, it's desperate, Lena said, her fingers flying across her keyboard. She's not trying to win. She's trying to muddy the water. She wants to freeze everything. She wants to drag this out in court for 5 years until Arthur is gone, and the truth is just a memory. So, what do? We detonate her entire case, Lena said. She hit send. We file our response. Lena's counterfiling was not an argument, it was a single, devastating exhibit. Attached to our motion to dismiss was a 12-page neuropsychological evaluation. The report was from Dr. Eli Kaplan, the Chief of Geriatric Psychiatry at St. Jude's, and it was dated the same day as Arthur's videotape deposition. Lena had insisted Arthur undergo a 4-hour cognitive assessment before he swore on camera. The conclusion was brutal. Mr. Monroe is not suffering from senility, dementia, or any cognitive impairment. He demonstrates a superior level of intellect. His recall is precise. He is, however, suffering from acute situational distress and emotional trauma consistent with a profound familial betrayal. Lydia's lawsuit, the claim of senility, was dead on arrival. The next attack came from Marina. She, who had been silent, finally made her move. She was smarter than her mother. She didn't use the courts, she used the gutter. A video leaked onto a notorious gossip blog. It was dark, grainy footage, appearing to be from a cell phone. It was the gas station, but this version had audio. Just give me the money, old man, my voice snarled. You owe me. You give me what's mine, or I'll tell everyone what they did. Then Arthur's voice, shaking. Please just leave me alone. It was a fabrication, a disgusting deep-faked piece of audio layered over the silent security footage. But it was good. It was just believable enough. Within an hour, the narrative was shifting. Was Piper Davis the real villain? Blackmail at the Beacon. This is vile, I whispered, watching it on Lena's monitor. This is a mistake, Lena said, her eyes narrowed. This isn't a random leak. This has a fingerprint. She's desperate. She's getting sloppy. Lena's tech team, the same people who had mirrored the Winter Meridian servers, got to work. It took them less than 3 hours. The file was uploaded from a proxy server, the tech lead reported via speakerphone. But the file itself, the metadata, is intact. It was created on an editing suite, exported at 10:17 a.m. yesterday. The workstation ID is 00144113B7. That workstation, he paused, is registered to Vail Consulting LLC. It's Marina Vail's personal desktop. Lena smiled. It was the first time I had ever seen her smile. It was terrifying. She didn't just commit a lie, Lena said. She manufactured evidence, and she did it while under a legal hold from the Foundation. She's tampering. She was on the phone to the courthouse in minutes. Your Honor, we are filing for an emergency TRO and an exfoliation order. Yes, active tampering. We have the server logs. We need to freeze her servers right now before she destroys the master file. The judge, the same one who had seen the original forgery evidence, was furious. He granted the order immediately. By 5 p.m., federal marshals were at the Vail Consulting offices serving the order. Marina was legally barred from touching, deleting, or altering a single file on her own computers. We had her trapped. That night, I finally went home. I was bone-weary. I was sitting in my dark apartment, the glow of the city lights outside, when my phone buzzed. A blocked number. It was a text message. Just one line, they haven't found it all. Check safe deposit box number 7. First National. Evelyn's old branch. My heart stopped. An anonymous tip. A disgruntled employee. Someone from Sterling's office. It didn't matter. I called Lena. I need to get into a safe deposit box that belonged to Evelyn. You can't, she said. You're not the executor. I am, I said, the realization hitting me. The vote in the boardroom reverted the trust to its original state, the state before they cut me out. I am the sole beneficiary of the Evelyn Legacy Trust once again, and Arthur is the protector. We can get in. The next morning, the bank manager at the First National, after seeing the fresh court orders presented by Arthur, used the bank's master key to open box number 7. It was a long, thin box that hadn't been opened in over 5 years. It was almost empty. At the bottom, there was nothing but a single black external hard drive. We took it back to Lena's office. We plugged it in. The room was silent. The drive was full of thousands of files. Mostly mundane backups of household receipts, insurance policies, and then a folder labeled Study Webcam. It was full of video files. Hundreds of hours of footage from the camera, on top of Evelyn's personal computer in her study. Most of it was just her sitting at her desk, writing letters, paying bills. Then Lena clicked on a file dated 2 weeks before her surgery, the day she must have known she was sick. Evelyn was in the frame, wearing the silk bed jacket. I remembered she wasn't alone. Mr. Sterling, the family lawyer, was sitting opposite her. Evelyn, Sterling's voice was placating. A handwritten note is just not legally binding. If you want Piper to have this power, we must file a formal amendment. I know what a legal document is, Howard, Evelyn snapped, her voice weak, but laced with steel. But I know my children, and I know Arthur. If I file this amendment, Lydia and Sebastian will contest it. They will tear this family apart trying to break it. So, what do you want to do? Evelyn leaned forward, looking directly into her own webcam, as if she knew somehow that this was her final testament. I am giving Piper the bracelet. I am writing Arthur the letter, but I am telling you, my lawyer, as a witness, if I go first, do not let Lydia or Sebastian touch the fund. Do not let them convince Arthur. They are not built for it. They are takers. I want this on record. I want you to remember this. Don't let Lydia touch the fund. She will break it. The video ended. I was crying silently. This was it. This wasn't a note, it wasn't a memory. This was my grandmother, alive, sane, and explicitly stating her intent to her own lawyer. Lena looked at the screen, her face pale. My God, she whispered. Lydia's entire lawsuit was based on the claim that Arthur was senile, and I had coerced him. Marina's entire smear campaign was based on the lie that I was the predator. This video, this ghost from the machine, proved that Evelyn, Arthur, and I were all on the same side. It proved the only predators, the only liars, were them. They are trying to destroy evidence, I said, my voice shaking with a cold rage. Marina is deleting files. Lydia is trying to lock Arthur away. They think this is a war they can win with lies. The hearing for the spoliation order is tomorrow morning, Lena said, her voice hard. They will be there trying to unfreeze Marina's assets. Then that's where we end it, I said. We don't leak this. We don't send it to the board. We walk into that courtroom, and we play this file in front of the judge. We play it in front of them. We end this in public, where they can never, ever erase the truth. The courtroom was suffocatingly modern, all light wood and brushed steel, devoid of history or warmth. It was a probate hearing, not a criminal trial, but the air was just as heavy. Lydia, Sebastian, and Marina were there, huddled with their lawyers, looking smaller, paler, diminished by the fluorescent lighting. Lydia's lawyer, a man I didn't recognize, stood to address the judge. He was arguing their motion to unfreeze Marina's assets and challenging the dismissal of their senility lawsuit. Your Honor, he argued, we have clear evidence of coercion. This deepfake video, Ms. Warwick alleges, it is just as likely that her client fabricated it to frame Ms. Vale. It is a he said she said. No, Lena said, standing up. It is not. The judge, a sharp-eyed woman named Kaplan, looked at Lena. Ms. Warwick, the court has reviewed the TRO on Ms. Vale's assets. You claim active spoliation and evidence tampering. We do, Your Honor, Lena said, and we are prepared to prove not just that claim, but the entire pattern of fraud and forgery that invalidates every action taken by the plaintiffs for the last 5 years. We will present 3 layers of truth. The judge nodded. Proceed. Lena dimmed the lights. A large monitor on the wall flickered to life. Layer 1, the event, Lena said. The grainy, red-hued footage from the beacon gas filled the screen. The entire courtroom watched the silent film. They saw Arthur's bored face, the $20 bill, the turn, the sleeve, the bracelet, and the freeze. They saw the raw, undeniable shock. This is Exhibit A, Lena said. Not coercion, not blackmail. The moment a patriarch realized the truth. The screen changed. Layer 2, the crime. It was the simple, brutal timeline. On the left, the digital signature of Arthur Monroe on the grant approval. March 14, 3:45 p.m. On the right, the anesthesiologist's report, patient under general anesthesia, triple bypass, 11 a.m. to 4 p.m. Exhibit B, Lena said, the physical impossibility, the forgery. Lydia's lawyer jumped to his feet. Objection, he argued. This proves nothing about the trust. It's a $50,000 clerical error at best. Which brings us to Layer 3, Your Honor, Lena said, her voice dropping. The intent. The screen changed again. The courtroom was now looking into Evelyn Monroe's study. They saw her, frail but fierce, wearing her silk bed jacket. They saw Mr. Sterling, the lawyer, and they heard her voice. Do not let Lydia or Sebastian touch the fund. They are takers. I want this on record. Don't let Lydia touch the fund. She will break it. Lydia let out a sound, a strangled gasp. It was the sound of a ghost appearing in a sterile courtroom. It was the sound of her own mother reaching across time to condemn her. Objection, her lawyer bellowed, truly frantic now. This is a fabrication. It's inadmissible. Where did this tape come from? It's slander. It's been edited. It's deepfake. Lena paused the video on her mother's determined face. Your Honor, she said. This hard drive was recovered yesterday morning from Evelyn Monroe's private safe deposit box number 7 at First National Bank. A box unopened since her death. We have the bank manager's affidavit. We have the metadata from the drive, authenticated by Northlight Forensics. It is the original, time-stamped, unedited file. It is the truth. The lawyer sat down. He didn't speak again. Judge Kaplan was silent for a full 10 seconds. She looked at the frozen image of Evelyn. Then she looked at Lydia. Her face was granite. This court is satisfied, the judge said, her voice a hammer. The motion by Ms. Davis and Ms. Vale to declare Mr. Monroe incompetent is dismissed with prejudice. The neuropsychological evaluation from Dr. Kaplan, taken before the deposition, renders the claim not just baseless, but frivolous and malicious. Lydia's face was white. The motion by Ms. Vale to unfreeze her assets is denied. The metadata evidence presented by Ms. Warwick regarding the fabricated audio file is compelling. This court finds that Ms. Vale did, in fact, engage in active evidence tampering. Marina let out a low, shaking sob. Furthermore, the judge continued, this court confirms and validates the activation of the Trust Protector Clause. The evidence of sustained, systematic forgery, and undue influence is overwhelming. The amendments to the Evelyn Legacy Trust dated after March 13 are nullified. The trust is reverted to its original state. She looked at Lydia and Sebastian. You are hereby permanently and for cause removed from any and all fiduciary, trustee, or management roles associated with the Monroe estate, its trusts, or its foundations. You will vacate the premises at Riverside Court by 5 p.m. tomorrow. It was done. A public legal execution, but the judge wasn't finished. She turned her gaze to Marina. Ms. Vale, your actions go far beyond a civil dispute, the creation of shell corporations, the conspiracy to defraud the foundation, and the manufacturing of false evidence to be used in a court proceeding. These are criminal matters. She picked up a binder. This court is referring the entire file, the Northlight audit, the server logs, the fabricated video, and the testimony from Mr. Hayes, to the District Attorney's Office for immediate criminal investigation. The final hearing took place not in the court, but back in the Frostbridge conference room under the supervision of a court-appointed monitor. The board, having seen the judge's ruling, was somber. We have one item of business, Eleanor Vance said. The appointment of a successor protector. She looked at Arthur, then at me. The motion on the table, she said, is to appoint Ms. Piper Davis as the successor trust protector under the constitutional framework proposed by Ms. Warwick, all decisions co-signed by an independent commissioner, and all major actions subject to a 2/3 board supermajority. She called the vote. It was unanimous. The documents were already prepared. Arthur picked up the pen. His hand was shaking again, but not from weakness, from relief. He signed the heavy document, the official transfer of power. He pushed the ledger across the black granite toward me. His eyes weren't on the paper, they were on my left wrist, on the heavy, tarnished silver. She always knew, he whispered, his voice thick. She chose the right one. My first act as protector was to stand. My thanks to this board, I said, my voice steady. In accordance with my new duties, I am activating a 90-day transparency initiative. I laid out the plan. We would publish the entire Northlight audit on the Foundation's website. We were immediately terminating all vanity grants, starting with the funds earmarked for the Julian Hayes Art Wing, and we were opening a new public-facing community portal, allowing local charities and organizations to apply for the millions that had for years been used as my family's private piggy bank. I was not the new queen. I was the new custodian. I saw my mother one last time. She was waiting by the elevators, Sebastian beside her, both of them looking grey and empty. Her lawyers were gone. Her power was gone. She looked at me, her eyes hollow, searching for the daughter she had tried to erase. I just held her gaze. I didn't feel anger. I didn't feel triumph. I felt the quiet, the end of the noise. She looked away first. The elevator doors opened. She got in, the doors closed, and she was gone. That night, I was not at the office. I was not at the gas station, or the lumber yard. I was in Arthur's study at Riverside Court. The house was mine, but it didn't feel like it. It felt like a museum. The safe behind the painting was open. Arthur, sitting in his old leather chair, handed me the original leather-bound trust ledger, the one Evelyn had started 50 years ago. I took it. It was heavy. I unfastened the EAM bracelet from my wrist. For the first time in 5 years, my arm felt light. I placed the bracelet on top of the closed ledger, the oath, and the book it was meant to protect. I put them both together inside the cast-iron safe. I swung the heavy door shut. It closed with a final, definitive, echoing sound. The tumblers fell into place. The long night was over. The knot was resolved.